I never thought fried chicken could haunt me. I used to laugh at those creepypasta stories people wrote online about fast food places. You know the ones. Haunted McDonald's bathrooms, a Wendy's that never closes but is always empty, Taco Bells where employees vanish mid-shift. I thought all of it was just internet horror fluff. But after what I experienced during my time working at a Kentucky Fried Chicken in rural Ohio, I don't laugh anymore. I don't even eat chicken anymore. Sometimes I can't even walk past a KFC without my skin crawling. This isn't a story I like telling, but it's one that keeps me awake some nights, and maybe sharing it will help me finally let go. Or maybe it will just pass the curse along to you. I was 19 when I got hired at KFC. The job was nothing glamorous, but it paid just enough for gas money, a few bills, and some weekend fun. Most of my shifts were nights because nobody else wanted to close. I didn't mind. The pay was a little higher, the store was quiet, and I could just zone out while cleaning. The building itself was old, probably built in the late 70s and barely renovated since. Greasy tiles, squeaky doors, and the lingering smell of chicken oil that never truly went away no matter how hard we scrubbed. Still, the manager, Todd, always insisted everything was fine. That was his word, fine. Even when the fryer broke down or the soda machine hissed weird noises, Todd just shrugged. But there were rumors. The older employees sometimes whispered about the basement. Officially, the KFC didn't have one. There was no door, no stairs, no access of any kind. But people swore they heard noises under the floorboards during night shifts. Low scraping sounds, heavy thuds, even faint laughter. I brushed it off as tired brains playing tricks. After all, when you're mopping greasy floors at 1 a.m., your imagination tends to wander. My first month went smoothly. Then came the night everything changed. It was a Friday, late fall. The parking lot was empty, leaves blowing across the cracked asphalt under a flickering streetlight. I was the only one closing because Todd had left early for some urgent thing. I remember being annoyed. I hated taking out the trash alone. The dumpster was all the way in the back lot near the tree line, and the shadows seemed to swallow the weak light from the building. I carried 2 heavy trash bags out and tossed them in. That's when I heard it. A muffled knocking. I froze. It wasn't from behind me, not from the trees. It was underneath me, the ground itself. 3 slow knocks, like someone was trapped beneath the pavement. I remember whispering, "What the hell?" under my breath, trying to convince myself it was just pipes or maybe raccoons under the dumpster. But then it came again. Louder. 4 knocks this time. And then a dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across a floor beneath the earth. I ran back inside, locked the back door, and tried to shake it off. I told myself it was nothing. Just trash settling in the dumpster, just my tired brain. But deep down my chest felt tight, and I couldn't stop glancing at the floor. The rest of the cleanup was routine. Sweeping, wiping counters, shutting down fryers. Around 2:15 a.m., I turned off the last light and headed for the exit. That's when I saw it. By the mop sink in the corner near the supply closet, the tiles looked wrong. I swear they weren't like that before. They bulged upward just slightly, like the floor was breathing. I crouched closer, heart hammering, and noticed faint grease stains forming a shape. At first, I thought it was random, but the longer I stared, the clearer it became. It was a handprint, not a normal one either. The fingers were too long, bent at strange angles, smudged deep into the tile as if pressed from beneath. I bolted out of there and didn't even clock out. The next day, I showed up for my shift expecting someone to ask about the mess or the missing clock out, but nobody said a word. I checked the tiles by the sink. Perfectly normal, flat and clean like nothing ever happened. I almost convinced myself I had hallucinated until the next week. That Tuesday, I was closing again, this time with a coworker named Jenna. Around midnight, while she was scrubbing trays, she froze and whispered, "Do you hear that?" I listened. Knocking. Faint, but steady. 3 knocks. Pause. 4 knocks. She went pale. "It's under the floor," she said. almost too quietly to hear. We dropped everything and left without finishing cleanup. Todd was furious the next morning, but we didn't care. Jenna refused to work nights after that. Me? I should have quit, but bills don't pay themselves. Over the next month, things escalated. Lights flickered whenever I mopped near the sink. The freezers would hum in a low, vibrating pitch that made my teeth hurt. Once, when I was taking inventory, the walk-in cooler door slammed shut on its own and locked me inside. I screamed and pounded until it finally opened, but when I stumbled out, the timer on my phone said I had only been trapped for 30 seconds. To me, it felt like hours. The worst part was the laughter. It started soft, like kids giggling far away. But over time, it grew louder, sharper, echoing under the floor. Sometimes it sounded like dozens of voices, all whispering at once. I couldn't make out the words, but they carried a hungry, mocking tone. I stopped telling people. Nobody believed me anyway. Then came the final night. It was close to Christmas. Snow piled up against the windows, the roads slick and empty. I was closing alone again. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard the knocks, louder than ever, shaking the tiles. The handprint by the mop sink returned, darker this time, fingers clawing upward. My gut screamed at me to leave, but something else. Something pulled me closer. Before I realized it, I was kneeling by the tiles, pressing my ear to the cold floor. That's when I heard the voice. Clear, male, whispering my name. Ethan. I staggered back, heart racing. How the hell did it know my name? The tiles cracked. Just slightly, but enough for a thin line of darkness to split through. From that gap, a smell oozed out, like burnt chicken mixed with rotten meat. I grabbed my stuff and ran. That was the last time I ever worked there. I quit the next morning. No explanation. Months later, the KFC shut down. Officially, they said it was due to structural issues with the foundation, but I know the truth. I know what was under that floor. Sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, I pass the abandoned building. The windows are boarded, the parking lot cracked and empty, but if I roll down the window and listen carefully, I swear I can still hear it. The knocking, 3 knocks, pause, 4 knocks, and once, I heard my name again. But this time it wasn't coming from the ground. It was from the back seat of my car. I used to think working late-night drive-thru shifts was the easiest gig in the world. Fewer customers, less mess, and more downtime to scroll on my phone. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The later the hour, the stranger the people who pull up to that glowing menu board. I'm not even sure if what I saw was a person. This happened 2 summers ago. I was 22, working at a small KFC in Indiana that stayed open until 3 a.m. on weekends. The drive-thru was our main business at night. People leaving bars, drunk college kids, insomniacs looking for greasy food. Most of the time it was harmless, sometimes even funny. But one night, a little after 2:45 a.m., a car pulled up that I'll never forget. I was wiping down counters when I heard the crackle of the intercom. Static hissed for a good 5 seconds before I heard a voice. "I'd like a bucket." That was it. No number, no sides, no drinks. Just those 4 words, slow and deliberate. I leaned toward the mic. Could you repeat that?" The voice came again, louder this time. "A bucket." Now, normally, customers specify an 8-piece, a 12-piece, crispy or original, whatever. So I asked, "What size? Do you want a meal or just chicken?" The static crackled again, followed by a long pause. Then, in a low, guttural tone that sent chills crawling up my spine, the voice said, "Just the bucket." I thought maybe it was a drunk prank. People did that sometimes, ordering weird stuff just to mess with us. So I played along. "All right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Pull forward." The car rolled up to the window, but even before it stopped, something felt wrong. It was an old black sedan, the kind that looked straight out of the 80s. The paint was dull, the headlights flickered, and the windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. The engine made this low, uneven rumble like it was choking on air. I slid open the window. That'll be. But I froze. The driver leaned forward, and for the first time I got a look inside. The man behind the wheel wasn't right. His face was too pale, like grayish dough. His eyes bulged slightly, glassy and unblinking, and his mouth stretched into a smile so wide it looked painful. He didn't blink, didn't twitch, didn't even breathe. He just stared at me with that grin. And then, he said it again. "The bucket." I tried to laugh it off. We don't actually sell empty buckets, sir." "Do you mean a family meal? Chicken? Biscuits?" His grin twitched, just slightly, enough to make me realize his skin wasn't sitting right on his skull, like it was too loose, hanging unnaturally. "No," he said slowly, his voice dropping even deeper. "I only want the bucket." By now, my nerves were shot. I stepped back from the window, heart hammering. I whispered to my coworker, Luis, who was mopping nearby. "Dude, come here, look at this guy." Luis glanced over, but the second he did, the car seemed to shift. The man's face wasn't visible anymore, just darkness behind the glass. Luis frowned. "What guy? There's nobody there." I whipped my head back toward the window. The car was gone. I swear to God, it vanished. One second it was idling there, headlights flickering, and the next, the lane was completely empty. No sound of tires, no taillights disappearing down the lot. Just nothing. Luis laughed it off, said I was overtired. But I know what I saw, or at least I thought I did. Because 3 nights later, it happened again. Same time, 2:45 a.m., same crackle of the intercom, same voice. "I'd like a bucket." I froze, my throat dry. I thought about ignoring it, but something compelled me to respond. "Pull forward," I said, barely above a whisper. The same car rolled up. Same pale-faced man, same grotesque smile. But this time, he reached out of the window. His arm was long, too long, the skin sagging around the elbow like wet cloth. In his hand he held money, old bills, faded, yellowed, some torn at the edges. "For the bucket," he said. My hand shook as I reached out, but Luis grabbed me. "Don't." His voice cracked. "Don't take it." We both looked back at the car, empty again, gone. That night, Luis swore he saw it too. He told me something his uncle once said, that back in the 80s a man disappeared after pulling into that very drive-thru. He ordered chicken, then drove to the window and never came out the other side. No one saw him leave, no body, no car, nothing. People said the building was cursed, built over something that shouldn't be disturbed. I tried to forget. I really did. But 2 weeks later, I was closing alone. 2:45 a.m. The intercom hissed. "I'd like a bucket." This time, I didn't answer. I shut off the mic, turned off the lights, and crouched behind the counter, praying it would go away. But then came the sound. A scraping, dragging noise outside the window, like something heavy being pulled along the pavement. Slowly. Closer. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. No name, no history, just 3 words. "Check the bucket." I almost dropped the phone. My breath caught in my throat. Against every ounce of common sense, I peeked over the counter and glanced at the window. There was something sitting on the ledge. A KFC bucket. Not a new one, not even one from our store. This thing was old, the logo faded, grease-stained and warped like it had been sitting in dirt for decades. I inched closer, my legs trembling. Against my better judgment, I lifted the lid. Inside wasn't chicken, it was full of human teeth. Dozens of them. Some yellowed, some bloody, some small like they belonged to kids. They rattled against each other as I dropped the bucket and stumbled back, gagging. The lights flickered. The intercom crackled, and for the first time, the voice said more than 3 words. "You're next." I don't remember much after that. Luis found me the next morning, passed out by the sink. The bucket was gone. I quit the following week. The manager laughed when I tried to explain, told me I was watching too many horror movies. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I hear my phone buzz. No caller ID, just 3 words flashing on the screen. The bucket waits. People always joke about Colonel Sanders' secret recipe. 11 herbs and spices locked away in a vault guarded like the crown jewels. It's a marketing gimmick, right? At least, that's what I thought. But after what I found during my time working at a KFC in Kentucky, an old one of the first franchises, I don't laugh about secret recipes anymore. I've never told this story online before. Honestly, I've been scared to. I signed things when I worked there, contracts about confidential information and internal procedures. But I can't keep this inside any longer. People deserve to know that what KFC is hiding isn't about protecting some flavor combination. It's about protecting us. I got the job in 2019 right after dropping out of college. It was supposed to be temporary. The store was in a small town just outside Louisville, a rundown building with wood panel walls and an old sign that still had the Colonel's painted smile fading in the sun. It was owned by a man named Gerald, who was pushing 60, but had been running that store since his 20s. Everyone in town knew him. He was the kind of guy who didn't tolerate nonsense. He barked orders, never smiled, and locked the office door every night at closing. Nobody ever went in except him. The rumor among employees was that he kept the real recipe there, some handwritten sheet he'd gotten directly from corporate years ago. I thought it was just gossip. Until one night, Gerald trusted me with something I'll never forget. It was a Tuesday, dead quiet. Only one customer the whole evening. Around closing, Gerald asked me to stay late. "Got something to show you," he said, his voice gravelly. I followed him into the back, where he unlocked the office. I'd never been inside before. The smell hit me first, not grease, not chicken, but something sharp and metallic, almost like blood. The room was small, with a desk, filing cabinets, and a giant walk-in safe against the wall. He spun the dial, opened it, and pulled out a box. A plain wooden box, about the size of a shoebox, with strange markings carved into the lid. They weren't English. They weren't anything I recognized. "This," Gerald said, setting it on the desk, "is the real recipe." I laughed nervously, thinking he was about to show me a scrap of paper with salt plus pepper plus paprika written on it. But when he opened the box, my blood ran cold. Inside wasn't paper, it was flesh. A strip of dried, leathery skin, curled at the edges, etched with symbols. It looked ancient, brittle, and burned into it in dark brown stains was writing. Not ink, not marker, burnt in. Gerald handled it like it was priceless, laying it flat. "You think it's herbs and spices? Nah, that's just the cover story. The flavor comes from this." He tapped the flesh with one yellowed fingernail. I swallowed hard. "What is that?" His eyes gleamed. "Recipe of the Colonel. Passed down from the beginning. Not for taste." He leaned in close. "For preservation." I backed away, the air in the office thick, suffocating. Preservation of what? Gerald smiled for the first time since I'd known him. And it wasn't a nice smile. "You ever notice how the chicken never really goes bad? Not like it should? You think it's the oil, the freezer, the chemicals. No, it's this. It keeps the meat fresh." I wanted to laugh, to call him insane, but I remembered all the times I'd seen leftover chicken left out overnight, only for it to look perfectly fine the next day. Then Gerald told me the part that made me nearly vomit. "This isn't cowhide, kid. It's not leather. It's human. Always has been." I stumbled back, shaking my head. "You're messing with me." Gerald's grin widened. "Am I?" That's when he pulled open a drawer and tossed something onto the desk. Teeth, human teeth, dozens of them, some with fillings, some cracked, all yellowed with age. My stomach lurched. "They grind them," Gerald whispered. "Mix them in. That's the secret blend. That's why it tastes like nothing else on Earth. Because it isn't from Earth." I ran. Didn't care if he fired me, didn't care if I lost my paycheck. I just ran out of that building and didn't stop until I was halfway home. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I even say? My boss showed me a skin recipe book and human teeth. They'd laugh, or worse, they'd check, find nothing, and Gerald would know I ratted him out. So I stayed quiet, but that wasn't the end. 2 weeks later, Gerald didn't show up for work. His office was locked as usual. The assistant manager had to pry it open. The safe was wide open, the box was gone, and on the desk, burned into the wood, was a message. The recipe chooses who tastes it next. We never saw Gerald again. Corporate sent someone down, cleaned out the office, and told us not to ask questions. They shut that location 6 months later. I got another job, moved on, tried to forget. But sometimes late at night I still taste it. That flavor. That perfect, addictive flavor that no other fried chicken ever quite matches. And when I do, my tongue tingles. My teeth ache. And sometimes when I spit into the sink, I swear I see tiny flecks of skin mixed with the saliva. I haven't eaten KFC since. But the craving never goes away. It gets stronger, like something inside me is waking up, hungry for more. And the worst part? 2 nights ago, I came home to find a plain wooden box on my doorstep. Carved into the lid were the same strange markings, and taped to the side was a note. Your turn. I used to work at a KFC in Ohio when I was 19. It wasn't the best job, but it paid enough to keep gas in my car and ramen in my kitchen. The store itself was small, wedged between a pawn shop and a liquor store, the kind of strip mall KFC that never looked clean, no matter how much bleach we poured over the tiles. The fluorescent lights hummed constantly, the fryer oil burned your skin if you got too close, and the smell of grease never left your clothes. Still, I thought it was just another fast food job, until the smell started. It wasn't the normal smell of grease or even the sour stench of rotting chicken left in the trash too long. This was different. It was sharp, metallic, and strangely sweet, almost like spoiled meat mixed with something chemical. The first time I noticed it, I thought maybe a rat had died in the vents, but the odor didn't come from the kitchen. It came from the basement. Our KFC had this old, creepy basement that we barely used. The stairs were wooden and rotted, the air down there always damp, and the walls stained with water damage. We kept extra soda syrup boxes and cleaning supplies stacked along the walls, but no one liked going down there. The managers always avoided it, sending the new hires instead. I was one of those unlucky new hires. One night, close to closing, the smell got so strong that customers started complaining. A mother came up to the counter covering her child's nose with her hand and asked if something had died in the store. My manager, Stacy, forced a smile, offered her a free cookie, and then glared at me. "Go downstairs and check," she said. The moment I opened the basement door, the smell hit me like a punch in the face. I gagged so hard I nearly threw up on the stairs. The air was heavy, sticky, and rotten, as though something had been festering down there for weeks. I held my breath and clicked on the old flashlight we kept by the door. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on the syrup boxes stacked neatly against the wall. Everything looked normal at first, but then I noticed something. The concrete floor was wet, not just damp with condensation, but slick, like someone had spilled a bucket of dark liquid and never cleaned it up. My first thought was soda syrup leaking, but when I crouched closer, I saw it wasn't soda. It was red, thick, almost black in the dim light. My stomach turned as I realized it looked like blood. I wanted to run back upstairs, but something made me look deeper into the basement. At the far end of the room was a locked steel door I had never seen anyone open before. I always assumed it was for storage, or maybe an old boiler room. But that night, I swear I saw movement beneath the crack of the door, a shadow shifting. And then, something wet dripped from underneath. I stumbled back up the stairs, slamming the door behind me. My manager asked what I'd seen, and I lied. Nothing, just a busted syrup box. She stared at me for a long time as if she knew I was lying, then gave me the rest of the night off. But the smell didn't go away. For the next week, it got worse. Some nights it was so strong we couldn't breathe in the back kitchen. Customers kept walking out mid-order, gagging. Corporate sent an inspector, but Stacy wouldn't let him into the basement. She told him it was water damage and that repairs were already scheduled. I watched her smile while lying through her teeth. That's when I started asking questions. One of the older employees, Daryl, had worked at that KFC for nearly 20 years. I cornered him during a smoke break and asked about the basement door. His face went pale. He dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his boot, and muttered, "You don't want to know." "Why?" I pressed. He looked around like someone might be listening. "Because if you know, you don't get to leave." Then he walked back inside, leaving me in the parking lot with my heart hammering. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The smell, the liquid, the shadow, that door. Finally, one night after close, when it was just me and Stacy locking up, I decided to sneak downstairs. She was in the office counting the drawer, so I slipped through the basement door and crept down, my phone flashlight cutting through the dark. The smell was unbearable this time, thicker, stronger, like a slaughterhouse mixed with chemicals. My eyes watered. When I reached the steel door, I saw something I hadn't before. Scratches. Long, deep scratches carved into the metal, as if someone had dragged their fingernails or claws down the surface again and again. The liquid pooling underneath was fresh this time, dark, warm, and sticky. I bent closer, and that's when I heard it. Breathing. Not human breathing. Heavy, guttural, almost animalistic. It was slow, steady, and coming from right behind the door. I froze, every instinct in my body screaming to run. Then suddenly the breathing stopped. Silence filled the basement, broken only by the faint drip, drip, drip of liquid hitting the floor. And then, a whisper. My name. It came from the other side of the door. I bolted. I sprinted up the stairs so fast I nearly tripped and broke my neck. When I burst into the office, Stacy was waiting. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't even angry. She just smiled. "You weren't supposed to go down there," she said softly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were cold. I couldn't even respond. My throat was dry, my hands shaking. She handed me my paycheck in an envelope and said, "Don't come back tomorrow." That was it. Fired. No explanation. I left and never went back. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. A few weeks later, I drove past the strip mall on my way home from a late class. The KFC was gone. Not closed, not boarded up. Gone. The entire building had been demolished, the lot fenced off, and construction trucks parked around it. No one ever mentioned it again. No news articles. No explanation. Just gone. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the whisper, about the way it said my name, about the scratches on that steel door, and the question that haunts me most. If whatever was behind that door is gone now, where did it go? When I was in college, I worked night shifts at a KFC just off the interstate in Indiana. It wasn't a busy location, especially past 10 p.m. Most nights were dead silent. Just me, the fryer humming, and the occasional trucker pulling through the drive-thru for a bucket of chicken and a Coke. I actually liked the quiet. After the chaos of classes and dorm life, the stillness of the empty restaurant felt peaceful. But that peace didn't last long. It started one night around 12:30 a.m. I was wiping down the counter when the drive-thru headset beeped. I jumped, nearly dropping the rag, because it had been almost an hour since the last customer. I slipped the headset on and gave the usual greeting. "Welcome to KFC, what can I get for you?" Static hissed in my ear. No words, just faint static, like someone breathing into the microphone. I repeated my greeting, a little louder this time, thinking maybe the speaker was broken. Then through the crackle I heard something, not an order, not a voice, a laugh. It was faint, but it cut through me like ice. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was low, raspy, and dragged out, like whoever it was wanted me to hear every second of it. I froze, headset pressed tight against my ear, waiting. Then the line went dead. Silence. I stepped over to the drive-thru window and slid it open. The lot was empty. No cars, no headlights, nothing but the glow of the neon KFC sign flickering above the asphalt. My stomach twisted. Maybe it was interference, I told myself. Or maybe some kids screwing with me. I shut the window and went back to wiping down. But 15 minutes later, the headset beeped again. This time, when I answered, the voice was clearer. "Do you know what's in the chicken?" It was a man's voice, deep and distorted, like it was coming through an old radio. Excuse me?" I asked, my voice shaking. The line crackled, then the man spoke again. "Do you know what they put in the chicken?" I tried to laugh it off. 11 herbs and spices?" Silence. Then the laugh returned, low, rattling, too close in my ear. My skin prickled. I yanked off the headset and slammed it on the counter. My heart was pounding. The logical part of my brain screamed that it was just a prank. Maybe some bored trucker with a walkie. Maybe a drunk guy messing with the speaker. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I peeked out the drive-thru window again. That's when I saw it. A car, parked just beyond the light, at the edge of the lot. The headlights were off, but I could see the outline of the vehicle. A dark sedan. Someone was inside. I could feel their eyes on me, even though the windows were tinted. I backed away slowly, shut the window and tried to focus on cleaning. But the beeping wouldn't stop. Over and over, the headset chirped, each time the same voice asking the same question. "Do you know what's in the chicken?" By 1:45 a.m., I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the mop. I decided to call my manager, Tom. He lived about 15 minutes away. When he picked up, I begged him to come down, told him someone was messing with me. "Relax," he said, groggy. "Probably just a CB radio picking up interference. Happens sometimes by the highway. Just lock the doors and finish your shift." I wanted to argue, but right then, the drive-thru headset beeped again. Against my better judgment, I put it on. This time, the voice didn't laugh. It whispered, "Look behind you." My blood froze. I turned slowly, and there it was. The dark sedan was no longer in the lot. It was right at the window. I stumbled back, knocking the mop bucket over, water spilling across the tiles. My breathing was shallow, chest tight. The tinted window rolled down, inch by inch, until I could see inside. A man sat in the driver's seat. His face was pale, almost gray, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. His eyes were wide, unblinking, staring directly at me. And his smile, God, his smile, was stretched too wide, showing teeth that looked sharp, broken, wrong. He leaned closer to the speaker, though he was right outside the window, and whispered again, "You shouldn't eat here." I slammed the window shut and locked it. My hands were trembling so hard I nearly dropped the keys. I ran to the front doors and double-checked the locks. When I looked back at the drive-thru, the sedan was gone. Just gone. No sound of an engine. No headlights fading into the distance. Just empty asphalt. I called Tom again, this time screaming at him to come down. He finally agreed, said he'd be there in 15 minutes. I tried to stay busy, wiping counters, checking fryers, anything to distract myself. But then, the power went out. All at once, the hum of the fryers, the buzz of the lights, the neon sign outside. Gone. The restaurant was pitch black. My phone flashlight barely cut through the dark, and I could hear my own breathing echoing off the walls. And then the headset beeped. I had left it on the counter, but in the silence, the sound was deafening. My stomach turned as I slowly lifted it to my ear. Static. Then a whisper. "We're already inside." I dropped the headset and sprinted out the back door, not even caring if the alarm tripped. I ran into the parking lot, but it was empty. No sedan, no headlights, nothing. I waited there until Tom's car pulled up. When he unlocked the doors and flipped the breaker back on, the lights hummed to life. Everything looked normal, too normal. The fryer bubbling, the soda machine gurgling, like nothing had happened. But then Tom called me into the kitchen. His face was pale, his hands shaking. He pointed to the stainless steel prep table. Carved into the metal, deep and jagged, were words that hadn't been there before. "Do you know what's in the chicken?" I quit the next day. It's been 10 years since then, and I still refuse to eat at KFC. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving down the highway, I see a dark sedan parked at the edge of the road. Headlights off, and I swear, if I look close enough, I can see him smiling. When I was 17, I got my first real job at a small-town KFC in Kentucky. It felt kind of ironic, working at Kentucky Fried Chicken in Kentucky, but I was just happy to have a paycheck. The building was old, older than any of the other fast food joints in town. The paint was peeling on the walls, the fryers always smelled like they were one spark away from catching fire, and the basement storage room felt more like a dungeon than part of a restaurant. But what really stood out was the employee photo wall. Right near the break room, there was this cork board lined with Polaroids of every worker who had ever been there. Some were faded, their edges curled from years of grease in the air, but there were dozens of smiling faces, cooks, cashiers, managers. One photo, though, looked wrong. It was a picture of a young guy, maybe early 20s. He had a mop of black hair that covered one eye and a wide, almost forced grin. The caption underneath read, "Derek, Employee of the Month, 1998. The thing was, no one on staff had ever heard of Derek. Our manager, Lisa, had been there for 15 years and swore she didn't know him. "Old owner must have put it up," she said. "Don't worry about it." But the other employees whispered about him. They said Derek used to work night shifts alone, back when the store stayed open 24 hours. They said one night he went into the basement to grab more flour and never came back. No cops, no investigation, just gone. I thought it was a joke, until the night I closed alone. Lisa usually stayed with me, but she got sick and left early, telling me to lock up. It was around midnight when I heard it, the sound of the mop bucket rolling across the tiles. The problem was, I hadn't mopped yet. My stomach dropped. I turned the corner and there it was, the mop bucket. Rolling slowly across the floor, water sloshing inside even though it was bone dry 10 minutes earlier. My first thought was someone had broken in. My second thought was worse, that maybe the stories about Derek weren't just stories. I told myself I was being paranoid. I pushed the bucket back into the corner and went to finish wiping down the fryers. But then I heard footsteps, slow, steady, coming from the hallway by the break room. "Hello?" I called, my voice cracking. No answer. The footsteps stopped, and for a few seconds, the silence was so heavy it pressed against my chest. Then faintly, I heard something else. A voice. It was coming from the break room. I crept closer, every muscle in my body tense. As I got near the door, I realized the voice was humming. Low, tuneless humming. The kind of sound someone makes when they're cleaning or passing the time. I pushed the door open. The lights were off, but the photo wall caught my eye immediately. Derek's picture. It wasn't where it had been earlier. It was pinned in the very center of the board now, the edges sharp, the smile brighter, fresher, as if the photo had just been taken. I slammed the door shut and bolted for the front counter. My keys jingled in my hand as I tried to calm down. I told myself it had to be a prank. Someone messing with me. That's when I saw him. Through the reflection in the drive-thru window, a tall figure in a KFC uniform standing right behind me. His face was pale, wet, like he had just climbed out of water. His hair hung over one eye, and his grin, too wide, too forced, looked exactly like the photo. I spun around, but no one was there. The floor was wet, though, a trail of water leading straight to the basement door. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I followed. Each step squelched against the wet tiles, the trail darker and darker until I reached the basement. The door was wide open, and that humming. It was louder now, echoing up the stairs. I forced myself down, flashlight shaking in my hand. The basement smelled like mold and raw chicken, heavy and suffocating. I swept the light across the room. Soda syrup boxes, flour bags, old cleaning supplies. Nothing unusual. Until I saw the time clock. It was tucked against the far wall, dusty and cracked, clearly unused for years. But one card was still inside. I stepped closer, heart in my throat, and read the name on it. Derek. Clocked in, 11:59 p.m. No clock out. The humming stopped. I froze. My flashlight flickered, then went out. And in the pitch darkness, I felt it. Breath. Cold, damp breath brushing against the back of my neck. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind me. I didn't stop until I was outside in the parking lot, gasping for air. I called Lisa, told her I couldn't finish the shift, and drove home shaking so hard I nearly wrecked my car. The next day, I went back to quit. I didn't care about the paycheck, I just wanted out. But when I got there, something stopped me cold. Derek's photo. It was gone. In its place was a new Polaroid. The caption underneath read, Employee of the Month 2021. And it was a picture of me. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, the birthplace of KFC. For most people around here, fried chicken is just food. But for us locals, it's tradition, pride, identity. I never thought much of it until I got a summer job at one of the older KFC restaurants, a standalone building on the edge of town that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 70s. From the outside, it was charming. Red and white stripes, a smiling Colonel Sanders painted on the side, the works. But inside, it felt different. The air was always heavy, the lights dimmer than they should have been, and no matter how much bleach we used, the smell of raw meat lingered in every corner. On my first day, the manager, a strict older man named Carter, gathered us around and said something strange. This store has been here longer than any other in the state. We follow tradition here. We don't ask questions. We don't break rules. And above all, we respect the recipe. At the time, I thought he meant the famous 11 herbs and spices. But I would soon learn that what he called the recipe wasn't something you'd ever find on the menu. The night shifts were always the worst. We closed at 11, but Carter insisted we stay until after midnight to do special prep. I never understood why. Customers were gone, doors were locked, yet he'd keep us working. He'd wheel out an unmarked, dented metal barrel from the walk-in cooler. The thing reeked, like rotten meat mixed with bleach, and he never let anyone else touch it. He'd drag it into the kitchen, humming an old hymn under his breath, and disappear into the back for an hour. When I asked the other workers about it, they clammed up. One girl, Jess, shook her head violently and whispered, "Don't. Just don't." But I couldn't stop thinking about it. One night, curiosity got the better of me. Carter left for a smoke break and I slipped into the back. The barrel was there, lid slightly ajar. My stomach churned at the smell, but I pulled it open. Inside was chicken, but not like any chicken I'd ever seen. The skin was grayish, veins bulging, feathers still clinging to patches of skin. And the eyes, oh God, the eyes, were still in some of them, cloudy and staring. I stumbled back, gagging, slamming the lid shut. When Carter returned, he knew. His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, he didn't look like a grumpy old manager. He looked furious, terrified. "You opened it," he hissed. I tried to deny it, but he didn't believe me. That night, he made me stay late. Everyone else was sent home. He told me we had one final task. He led me to the basement door. I had never been down there before. The stairs creaked as we descended, the air thick with the same rancid smell from the barrel. The basement was larger than I expected, concrete walls stained dark, pipes dripping overhead. In the center was an industrial prep table, and on it, pieces of meat, piles of it. Some looked like chicken, others didn't. I froze. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Carter's face twisted into something between a smile and a grimace. "The recipe. You wanted to know? Now you'll see." He picked up a cleaver and hacked into one of the pieces. It wasn't chicken. The bone was too thick, the flesh too dark. My stomach turned when I realized what I was looking at. It was a human arm. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. "You're insane," I whispered. But Carter only shook his head. "No, this is tradition. This is why people keep coming back." The Colonel knew it. Flavor like this doesn't come from spices, it comes from sacrifice. He stepped closer, cleaver dripping, his eyes wild. "And now you're part of it." I bolted. I sprinted up the stairs, Carter shouting behind me, footsteps pounding. Somehow I made it out the back door and into the parking lot. I didn't stop running until I was 3 blocks away. When I went to the cops, they didn't believe me. They said I was making it up, that Carter was a respected man who'd managed that KFC for decades. When they finally did check the basement, everything was gone. No table, no meat, no barrel, just an empty, dusty room. I quit, obviously. I tried to forget, tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, that stress and exhaustion had twisted my brain. But then, weeks later, I saw the news. The headline read, "Longtime KFC manager missing. Police suspect, foul play." They showed a picture of Carter smiling stiffly in his uniform. And then, in the background of the photo, I noticed something. A corkboard lined with Polaroids of employees. The most recent one stopped me cold. It was me, smiling nervously in my uniform, my name written underneath, and scrawled across the bottom in red ink that looked like it had been smeared by a wet finger were the words, "Next ingredient."